Charlemagne, current host of The Breakfast Club, very successful man in America. He had on his talk show today, Cedric Richmond, which is a Louisiana senator. At a certain point, they discussed the Second Amendment, gun ownership, and the concept of Democrats being anti-gun or anti-2A. And it was full of so much misinformation that I couldn't help but break it down. This is the biggest load of BS I've ever heard. Before we get going though, I want to say thank you to the sponsor of this channel, Franklin Armory. They've been a huge supporter of me, the Second Amendment, and the people in California, as well as everywhere in the United States by pushing the boundaries of the NFA laws and the assault weapon laws. I'm appreciative of having their support, and if you are interested in any of their firearms, specifically the CA7, CA11, or CA12 in the state of California, feel free to check them out. I really would appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like, share it with your friends. This is something that I just think needed to be talked about for the massive amount of information that we're seeing from someone who is going to be writing laws that control what people can and can't do legally.
How many guns do you own right now, Cedric? Especially after hearing Donald Trump tell, the Proud Boys to be on standby. You a Louisiana man.
I have one gun, and I'm looking at purchasing another. And the unfortunate part is I saw a movie the other day, and I just decided that, with the chaos going on, the firearm that person had that I want. So
this is the classic tactic. I'm pretty sure every Democratic senator is legally required when they sign up to be a Democrat position. I think they're legally required to own one gun just so it allows them to say, as a gun owner, or I'm a gun owner and I believe this, but we'll get to that in just a second. He talks about his education and why he wants the certain gun he wants due to the chaos of the world because of a certain movie he saw. So I'm sure his information is probably top notch.
What kind of firearm was this? Was it a Desert Eagle or 40 caliber? What was it?
No, there's two that I want. One is the Judge. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a handgun. It's a revolver that can shoot either a 45 bullet or it could shoot, I think, a 401 shotgun shell. And that way, if you're home, I just go back to that scene in Boys in the Hood where Lawrence Fishburne shoots straight through the front door. If you're coming in my house, I'm going to assume that you are a foe, and I don't want to necessarily have to be aim the best. So that revolver with shotgun shells in it, I think
it spreads, yeah.
Trick.
One, this is a kind of nitpicky one. When your information comes from movies as a dictating choice of what firearm you want for self-defense, that's a horrible decision. Please do more research. You're going to be liable to throwing bullets down range, potentially. You don't want to be the person that made a bad decision because you were uneducated. Two, you can tell that he's a little bit, not the most educated on it. And this is very nitpicky. It's a 45 long Colt, which is very different than 45 ACP, which I'm assuming he thinks it is. He also said 401 shell. It's a 410, a little bit different. They then talk about the concept of, again, I don't know what it is with the Democrats. Maybe Joe Biden just convinced everyone that shooting a couple blasts in the air or shooting through the door is a good idea. But he's saying that he saw someone shoot a shotgun through the door. People need to realize that 410 is not the same as a 12 gauge loaded with double-aught buck. 12 gauge is a very large projectile. It has up to 9 pellets that are, I think, 38 caliber each, typically with a double-aught buck. 410, some of the most popular loadings have around 3 pellets that are significantly smaller than that. Not exactly something that I would consider ideal for self-defense. The spread on it is going to be minimal, and when the spread does happen, sometimes you end up having a spread pattern that's too wide. People think that you should get a shotgun for home defense because you don't need to aim at what you're shooting at. That's horrible, horrible. If you are going to be pulling the trigger, you want it to be going exactly where you want it to go. Obviously, in a gunfight, you're not going to be the most perfect shot. I'm not saying that everybody is a sniper and is going to be shooting the wings off a fly's ass at 100 yards in a gunfight. That's just unrealistic. The idea that they're thinking is going to be good of having widespread, not exactly something that you necessarily want because you're thinking, oh, I can just fire to my right. Well, what if there's someone that you don't want to hit? What do you do then? Because apparently, under your mind, you want a gun that's going to shoot everywhere. That's horrible. Just not the best advice in the world. If someone enters his home, he's assuming that they're a foe. Well, there's a lot of situations that could occur that would lead to someone being in your home that you don't want to shoot. You're also saying that you're assuming that that bump in the night that someone enters your home needs to die. Please, no. Target identification and proper target identification is very important. This guy seems like the ultimate FUD with his gun choice, but we'll continue.
You have young kids or no?
I have one, a 6-year-old.
Yeah, that's the reason why I have a bunch of handguns. But I use the 9mm so it doesn't go through the door or through the wall, just in case if my kids are sleeping and I got to shoot somebody. I want to make sure it doesn't go through their wall or through their door to hit them. So I got, just to make sure. But then I got one for bears, just in case a bear ever comes up.
So I really got to pause again here. I know I'm pausing a lot, but the idea that something that's going to be adequate for self-defense not going through walls like an interior door or an interior wall, I don't think you've ever seen what an interior door is typically made of. They're not exactly the most sturdy material. If a drunk college kid can plow through it like a piece of paper at a high school football game, I can assure you that a 9mm that's approximately 115 grain to 147 grain, moving at anywhere from 1,100 feet per second to 1,300 feet per second, is going to have a very easy time passing through that without any issue. Almost every single ballistic report I've seen for popular 9mm rounds for defensive use, and that's not even talking about FMJ. FMJ is going to penetrate significantly more. Every reliable defensive round in a 9mm is going to easily pass through several interior walls and potentially an exterior wall. The main reason you use a hollow point is because if it hits a water-based target, I'm going to say, it tends to travel less and leave more of the energy inside. Meaning that if you hit what you're intending to hit, it's going to be less likely to pass through and do more damage. Now, there are some benefits when it comes to hollow points versus full metal jacket target reloads that you would shoot at the range. The full metal jacket is going to penetrate through significantly more layers of wall than the hollow point or typically can, but you still have to understand that anything that is capable of taking a person's life is going to pass through a few layers of drywall, no questions.
So why do people think Democrats are anti-Second Amendment?
Excellent question.
I don't know. Look, the best hunter and shooter in Congress is a guy named Benny Thompson, a black guy from Mississippi. And Benny might have 20-something guns, and they range the gamut, but he is the best shooter. And so I don't know why people assume that we're not for the Second Amendment. But, everything has limits. You can't have a bazooka. I mean, it'd be probably cool to own a bazooka, but you can't.
Hell fucking yeah, it would be cool to own a bazooka. Let's go back to the beginning. Charlemagne is asking, why do people think that Democrats are against the Second Amendment? Well, it comes down to the fact it's very simple. When you look at the source of many of the gun laws, specifically here in California, almost every single gun law was signed and proposed and is currently being proposed by Democrats. Yes, I understand that Reagan banned open carry, and I hate him for that. I will not dick ride Reagan. So if you look at Joe Biden's plan on the Second Amendment, it's going to be something that would so heavily impact and infringe upon the rights of normal average people to keep and bear arms. And if we look at Charlemagne's Instagram post where he posted a clip of this interaction with him and the senator, the caption is, "I told y'all when you black in America, owning and knowing how to use a legal firearm is a form of self-care." I'm going to make the assumption that the reason Charlemagne values black people and African Americans in America owning and understanding how to use a firearm, I'm assuming that that doesn't have anything to do with the need to provide food by killing a deer. So when the senator here says that the best shooter in Congress is a excellent hunter and an excellent shot, I'm assuming that that might have absolutely nothing to do with the experience that many people of color and minorities in America experience. I'm assuming, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Charlemagne, if you watch this, which I absolutely highly doubt you will, I highly doubt, and I'm making the assumption that when you said that owning guns, or when you alluded to the fact that owning guns is important for people of color and minorities, that it didn't have anything to do with hunting and had more to do with protecting themselves from people that may want to do them harm simply because of who they are and how they were born. I'm assuming that you would like to be able to protect yourself in a world where the police can't, won't, have no legal obligation, and potentially are on the side that is trying to hurt you instead of help you. Now, those are just assumptions that I'm making, but you did just let this slide as far as what he said, this is what they think of the Second Amendment. But we'll continue.
And think about this. When they wrote the Second Amendment, there was no such thing as an AR-15. There was no such thing as an M16. So the framers of the Constitution were not talking about guns that could cause that much carnage in such little time. So, I don't know why, but to have some reasonable gun reform, like closing the Charleston loophole.
So we need to talk about restrictions. We have over 30,000 gun laws on the books in the United States. We've banned full autos, we've banned SBRs, we've banned short-barreled shotguns, which I'm believing is the one that was actually in the movie he was referencing earlier as far as why he wanted to get a shotgun to blast through the door. We can't have bazookas, obviously, we can't have grenades, we can't have full auto, I believe I said that. There's this whole slew of NFA laws as far as what you can buy, what you can't buy. It seems like there's a lot of restrictions. We then look at the fact that from the 1994 to 2004 assault weapon ban that was federal, that bans all of the current guns and all of the current magazines that many of these senators are actually running on a position of let's ban these. The Department of Justice looked at the 1994 to 2004 assault weapon ban and determined that it had no effect on violent crime. Violent crime has been steadily decreasing for the last 40 to 60 years. So if they've already done this, and apparently this is what they determine common sense, and they did it for 10 years and it did nothing, why would we want to go back and do that? This idea of weapons of war and the framers of the Constitution had no idea anything like that exists, we know that's also somewhat factually wrong because we know that there were semi-autos available, the Pluckett gun, that many of the framers of the Constitution knew existed or had reason to believe that there was knowledge of it existing. Why do we only talk about limiting what the Second Amendment covers when it comes to technological leaps and bounds, but never the first? We're using the internet to have conversations. They are on a podcast using electronic microphones and cameras. If you showed anyone from that age what we're doing now, they would be blown away in every way, shape, and form. So why are we not talking about limiting the First Amendment to only handwritten pen and printing presses?
Closing the Charleston loophole, where this kid sat in that church and he said the people were so nice to him that he had second thoughts before he murdered them. And you mean to tell me we can't just, if your background check doesn't come back in 72 hours, you have to have that gun? Well, let me just tell you something from my neighborhood. The person who needs a gun immediately is the person that shouldn't have a gun, because something is wrong if you want a gun and you cannot wait to get it. And so those are the types of things I think we just have to talk to the American people, that it's just common sense.
The person that needs a gun right now is the kind of person that doesn't need a gun or shouldn't have a gun. This idea of background checks, waiting periods, those things working, we know that doesn't work. In San Bernardino, I believe it was, or UC Santa Barbara, the shooter used 3 handguns, which in the state of California would require him to wait at least 90 days to acquire all 3 guns. He wrote a manifesto. These people that go out and do these mass murders are not going to be stopped because you made them wait a little bit longer to get the background check results. In addition to that, with the advent of 3D printing and just with the knowledge of P.A. Luddy's book, any idiot with access to a hardware store can manufacture a semi-auto 9mm. Any idiot with a 3D printer can access and the files and create a semi-auto 9mm. If you think that there is nobody that needs a gun right now in any given moment, that they shouldn't be able to go get one, that was probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Let me give you one scenario that might be a very realistic situation. Single mother with kids, divorces ex-husband, doesn't own any guns personally. Ex-husband at some point in time decides, I'm gonna start threatening them. Well, I'll let you know that a restraining order is simply a piece of paper. If that person lived in the state of California and wanted to buy a gun to protect herself and her child, it would take them at least 10 days. That's assuming they have a real ID, not a fake ID, assuming that the gun store has the guns available that they would need and would be adequate for self-defense. That's assuming that they have all the proper proofs of residency, because if they had, let's say, just moved out of the house, if they did not currently live at the address that they were supplying for that they had left from, they would need an ID with their current address. If their ID does not have their current address and was not a real ID, they would need a passport or their birth certificate. They would then need a proof of residency to satisfy the state, as well as a federal proof of residency, all three of which match their current physical address. Keep in mind, a P.O. box would not work. They would then have to get a firearm safety certificate. Once they get all of that paperwork done and all that stuff done, they could then buy a gun. Now, keep in mind, if that person is between the ages of 18 and 20, they would need to get a hunting license, which would take at least several weeks to get before they can buy only rifles that are not semi-auto center fire or a shotgun of any type. They could not buy a handgun, which would be realistically a more reasonable actual purchase for the person that might need to leave their home and carry it with them. In order to get a CCW permit, you're going to have to go through a course that's going to take 16 hours of training, is going to take anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half to get scheduled for an interview, depending on what county you are in the state of California. But yeah, I'm sure that that person that threatened them to the point where they feel they need a gun right now, I'm sure they don't need that gun. Yeah, I'm sure that's a situation that they're the bad person. I am very frustrated right now, but that's because what he said is the kind of laws that are only going to hurt people that are already hurting. These laws disproportionately affect people of color and minorities. The reason for that is because, one, generally they're going to be living in areas more likely that are high crime or high risk. When someone is poor, they are not going to spend the nearly $600 it's going to cost to get a permit to carry and pay for the training and do all that stuff. What's going to happen is they're going to have to make a tough choice. They're going to have to choose, do I break the law and risk getting caught, which many people do every single day? These laws affect people of color every single day. These laws affect impoverished communities every single day, because the laws that they're trying to pass are not the kind of laws that are going to be affecting actual criminals. What they're going to do is turn ordinary people into criminals, which is only going to further affect the ability for people of color and people that live in poor areas to get jobs and to have good careers and break out of the system. I'm getting heated. I'm getting sweaty. I apologize for that, but I couldn't not talk about it. This is ridiculous. These people are writing our laws currently.
I don't know why Democrats get the, probably because we let them say it. If you let people say stuff over and over again, people will start to believe it. It's why Muhammad Ali always said he was the greatest. Reporter asked him why. He said, if I say it enough, people will believe it. So we've let the Republicans say we're anti-Second Amendment so long that people actually believe it when we're not anti-Second Amendment. We're just pro-common sense.
That's actually the last point he makes, but here's the deal. Oh boy, that's a doozy. He thinks that they're actually pro-Second Amendment. We discussed earlier what his idea of Second Amendment is, and it covers bolt-action rifles or shotguns to hunt and to target shoot at the range for sport. Their idea of the Second Amendment is so far from what the Second Amendment was. The Second Amendment was and has always will be for the average citizen to have weapons of war. The average citizen is supposed to be able to have adequate tools to protect themselves. It's very easy to say you're pro-Second Amendment when you interpret the Second Amendment to read the right of the people to keep firearms that are only suitable for defense against bears and for shooting clays at a target range shall not be infringed unless you're between the ages of 18 to 21, and we don't want you to have certain types of those, but then it's fine. Their idea of the Second Amendment is so far disconnected from what the actual original intent of it was that they actually believe it. The reason people say Democrats are anti-gun is because if you look at people like Joe Biden's platform, he wants every single person that has a magazine in their gun that holds over 10 rounds to be either turn you into a felony, or pay $200 per. In addition to your semi-autos, you're going to have to pay $200 per magazine. So let's say you own a Glock 19. That gun has magazines that hold 15 rounds. Well, you're going to have to pay $200 to register the gun with the NFA. And then it comes with 2 mags, sometimes 3. Meaning that if you have 3 mags that the gun comes with, in addition to the gun, that's $800 that you're gonna have to pay to the government to keep that gun. The gun didn't cost $800 to begin with. These laws are only and have only affected people who are already impoverished by either being a person of color or by being some other minority group or being poor. People like me are not generally affected by the kind of laws that he wants to pass. One, because I have the tools if I wanted to build these illegal guns anyway, because anybody, like I said, with basic hand tools or a 3D printer could make these guns. 2, I'm wealthy enough to afford certain things like that to an extent. These laws are going to drastically affect the kind of people that really are already having a pretty rough time. All in all, I thought that this whole interview with him and when they were discussing guns was just a big steaming load of bullshit, and they just fed it down the American people's throat. So I wanted to talk about it. Feel free to watch it yourself if you would like to see that without my annoying input, but it's just something that I couldn't not talk about. You know the drill. Have fun, be safe, stay dangerous. Peace.